Welcome to the Best Florida Family Law Podcast. I have recently run across a fascinating article on MSN. It's published virtually everywhere in the internet, from Google to Yahoo to anywhere else that people are generally reading. The title of the article, of course, is Naming All of the Professions with the Highest Divorce Rate. I had never read that. I had never even considered it. You might imagine that in my line of work, I might try to establish some connections, some ties between these things, but I view every case as unique, individualized, and as special in its own way without trying to conflate any two principles or any two cases together. These answers are mildly comical. Not that there's anything funny about divorce, but they are mildly comical because one would think, why in the heck didn't I realize this sooner? Well, here goes. Jobs with the highest divorce rates, and this is an AI version from our friend Mr. Google. First, bartenders. Without reading the explanations for any of these, can we imagine why bartenders might have the highest divorce rates? Guy bartenders are sought after by a lot of single ladies who will position themselves at the bars because they want to meet someone. And it's sort of an easy access to the dating field, easy access to socializing. It makes sense. It might be difficult to have a serious relationship at a young age when you're surrounded by people that are interested in you at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning and alcohol is involved. Let's just talk about the reality of that. For women bartenders, it's been my experience, though I haven't been clubbing or to the bars in probably over 10 years, maybe even longer, which may make me sound like an old fogey, but I'm a married guy. I imagine that women bartenders are viewed as almost transcendent, as just absolutely beautiful and desirable, and the same principle applies to what would happen with male bartenders. There's alcohol involved. There's socializing involved. There are social pressures involved. So, to the extent that that profession might lead to a divorce, maybe it may be more as a result of infidelity in that particular sector. Chemical technicians? I've never met a chemical technician. I guess we can suggest that when a chemical technician, guy or gal, comes home from work, that their spouse might make them change their clothes all the time. Maybe that's alienating. Maybe being around hazardous chemicals can create some changes to the body or maybe alter somebody's mindset. I imagine that those are possible explanations. Are they plausible? I couldn't say. Telephone operator? I'm not sure that that's really an updated answer. Maybe they mean call center person or serviceman or servicewoman, insofar as that goes. A telephone operator, perhaps, comes home with a raspy voice. Maybe they are irritable after speaking with 200 or 300 people a day, making what's the equivalent of robocalls. Let's see here. A flight attendant. Well, it used to be something of a stigma to be a flight attendant. We used to call them stewards or stewardesses. Now, the general terminology is flight attendant. And what can we, at least speculatively, devise about this? Well, a flight attendant travels to different locations and is frequently on the go, maybe to Boston or New York or California, San Francisco, San Diego, Washington, Seattle, what have you, Texas. A flight attendant, guy or gal, a man or a woman rather, is probably always on the go. Would it be so difficult to find somebody in each city to keep you company? Would it be really difficult to imagine that somebody that lives a rather mundane life has adventure when they are a flight attendant and they go to some other locale? Maybe some people have 2 or 3 different families for that very reason. Let's see. Carpenters. There are any number of dad jokes, maybe more Bob Saget jokes that I could tell about carpenters. But why in the world would a carpenter have a high rate of divorce? I really cannot imagine. Maybe because The market, such as it is with home improvement and mortgage rates and things of that nature, maybe carpenters have a diminished income and that creates a financial strain on marriage. But short of making jokes about carpeting itself, I'm really not able to suggest why that might be. Military. Now, this one is a little more commonly known. If somebody's deployed for years at a time, they might lose the emotional connection to that spouse, that family. They might have access, even in another country, to other potential romantic partners. And let's not forget, being in the military is one of the toughest things, if you are deployed, that anybody could ever undertake. The pressures, the dangers, the stresses, the physical harm that is sometimes caused from being in a battle zone, even from training. People suffer some gruesome and catastrophic injuries. It is probably not difficult to imagine that there are any number of reasons why somebody in the military might have a high divorce rate. The psychological impact and PTSD alone are enough to give us great pause. Massage therapists, similar to bartenders and maybe even in a more physical, hands on manner, no pun intended, one can imagine that massage therapists are propositioned all of the time. When somebody is propositioned all of the time, there's a sort of a degree of um, maybe egotism that comes along with that. When somebody feels desired constantly and is frequently approached, it might create something of hostility. It might create something of mistrust for their partner. It's not entirely difficult to imagine that situation. But most massage therapists, although they are frequently propositioned, I would imagine 99.9% of massage therapists want nothing to do with that. But maybe in my mind, their partners might feel a little bit of jealousy because there's a physical touching component to being a massage therapist, and their spouse might feel a sort of jealousy and distrust. But you would imagine that the spouse would understand that going into the marriage. So I'm not really sure I agree with that one. Non-farm animal caretaker? I'm so sorry. That one deserves a laugh. I have absolutely no idea what a non-farm animal caretaker does, really, on a day-to-day basis. And I can't suggest that that would cause divorces at any higher rate. Medical assistants. There used to be an old stigma, or maybe I should say, sort of an old stereotype. Not that any of us ever wants to engage in stereotyping of any kind. It's flat out wrong and has no place in society. But it is worth mentioning because we're analyzing this. The stigma used to be that doctors and nurses and medical assistants, people at hospitals or other medical facilities, offices, they work so closely together in such an important capacity of healing people, whether it's their spine, their heart, their feet, whatever, what have you, that those folks might develop a sort of natural kinship, a day to day familiarity, and being in such a stressful environment might lead to some sort of infidelity. Also, being in the medical profession, beyond just having the opportunity to forge those friendships and maybe to have somebody really understand what you're going through and sympathize with you, in a sense, empathize. Maybe the fact that depending on which level of the medical field you are working in, there can be massively and substantially different financial pressures on you. Let's see, what else do we have here? Clerical library assistants have high rates of divorce. Well, I can't really understand why working in a library and stocking shelves and helping kids and people go into the library that are students and even adults find books. I cannot truly even begin to understand why that would lead to a higher rate of divorce. We have dancers and choreographers. Well, as far as the dancers go, dancers might dance in a manner which is provocative. They might travel across the country. They might perform at night. I'm not referring to what you think I'm referring to. I'm referring to folks that are on Broadway productions. I'm referring to folks that are perhaps dancers for professional sports teams. Dancers that put on performances in any number of fashions, and choreographers in positions of power. There are long hours and lots of travel involved. It can create a sort of separation and distance, literally and figuratively, between parties. What else here? Actuaries, telemarketers. I imagine that telemarketers, just because their job is so stressful, it's really hard to take, and earning a living in that field is not pleasant. Military supervisors, I think we've already gone through that one. Jobs with the lowest divorce rate, that's included as well. Wow, fascinating. And those are in the 20th percentiles. And the ones with the highest are in the 40s and 50s. Oh my goodness. Gaming cage workers? I have no idea what that is. Ambulance drivers are getting divorced at a very high clip. Small engine mechanics. Well, of course, small engine mechanics. Of course, that one. Let's see. First line supervisors of correctional officers. Well, why not correctional officers themselves? Why supervisors of correctional officers? That doesn't really jive with me. Extruding, forming, pressing, and compacting machine setters have a 48.8% divorce rate. And finally, what's the last one that we can do here? Ambulance drivers and attendants. I think I may have mentioned it a moment ago. That's astonishing. Why would an ambulance driver have such a high rate of divorce? At the end of the day, ambulance drivers do go home. The travel is probably local, not really state to state, not certainly international. So why would ambulance drivers have a high rate of divorce? Why would EMTs be in that category of having such a high rate? In any event, um, divorce impacts statistically about 45 to 55% of all folks that have been married, and many people have been divorced multiple times. Why these particular professions are subject to the greatest uh, percentage of divorces, I really can't say with scientific certainty. We can only speculate, but it is worth thinking about. And maybe before you get married, or maybe if you're going to marry somebody who isn't one of those professions, or if you were in one of those professions, you might want to have serious discussions about the stresses of the job and maybe how you can prevent it from happening before it ever happens. Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast.